I would like to welcome everyone. My name is Sheila Matias, and I'm the Executive Director of the Leadership Institute and the Society of Innovators. We're really delighted today. It's going to be an awesome lunchtime together. Feel free to have your sandwich and drink your beverage of choice as we're talking, because this is lunch hour and we really appreciate you spending your lunchtime with us. A little bit about the Leadership Institute. We are the hub of leadership development in Northwest Indiana and are strongly associated with Purdue Northwest, who supplies us with all great academic expertise. We have some academics on the call with us. Dr. Rachel Smith is our academic director, and Dr. Jane Thomas is our assistant academic director at the Leadership Institute. And they also advise us on the Society of Innovator programming and presentations. So we are delighted to be sponsoring an opportunity to talk to Earl. Earl's one of our favorite people. He has been so generous with his time from his work at Hiler, where he is the Chief Innovation Officer and a head of engineering. He's going to talk to us today about cultivating a workplace that encourages innovation, encourages engagement, and encourages continuous improvement. So regardless of whether you're an engineer like Earl, or whether you are in social services or in education or in healthcare, innovation is necessary in all workplaces and also in our own personal life. So I've heard Earl present before, and he's just not only a great human, but he's really dedicated to thinking differently about common challenges and coming up with ways to rewire your brain, rethink the way we strategize around challenges. So today should be a great session. I'm going to pass to Jason, who will give us a little bit more detail about Earl's background, and then we're going to give Earl the floor, and it promises to be a really great time spent together today. So thank you so much for joining us. Jason?
Yeah, thanks, Sheila. So hello, everyone. I see a few new faces on here as well. My name is Jason Williams. I'm the Managing Director here at the Society of Innovators, really a sister organization to the Leadership Institute, but one where we're starting to collaborate much more closely and obviously teaming up on events like this. In short, the Society of Innovators, if you're not familiar with our division, really aims to contribute to economic and community development through innovation here in Northwest Indiana, and really being the champions of innovation and innovators around the region through our annual awards and induction ceremony. Before I introduce Earl, I know he already mentioned, for those of you that were on here a few minutes early, there is going to be an activity. We're going to ask you to have your cameras on, but we would ask you to stay muted just to help eliminate any background noises and distractions as we go here. There'll be an opportunity for Q&A later where you can turn your mic on and ask those questions, but thanks in advance for that. So yeah, let's to dive into our program. Really excited about hearing from Earl. Actually, between the Society and Leadership Institute, he's now part of our regular lineup. So we always love hearing from you, Earl. Earl is the Director of Innovation and Engineering at Hiler Industries in LaPorte. So they're a metal casting manufacturer focused on a wide variety of industries, namely truck trailers, heavy equipment, agriculture, many others. I'm sure Earl may touch on that. One of the projects really is the Director of Innovation. He's really been responsible for helping Hiler leap into robotic automation and bringing more technology and intelligence into the work there. And just a few pieces from his background we thought were relevant this morning. He did attend Purdue North Central before completing his degree in West Lafayette. During his years of education, we won't hold it against him that he fled downstate, but we'll certainly claim him here at P&W now as an alum, or at least partly as an alum. And then his innovation path. Obviously, engineering was his background. He studied mechanical engineering at Purdue, but Earl's had several learning opportunities developing as an innovator. He went through the Beacon Health File Innovation Center in South Bend when they had a two-day immersion a few years ago. He's a graduate of Notre Dame's Certified Innovation Mentorship Program, and now is a mentor in that program, giving back through that. And he's also gone through some Foresight creative problem solving trainer through Notre Dame. And he's now been a regular on the innovation circuit here across the state of Indiana. I actually first connected with Earl through the Day of Innovation Conference down in Indianapolis. He's been, I think, a regular each year at Idea Week over in South Bend. So certainly a thought leader here in Northern Indiana for sure, but now really increasing across the Midwest as a known thought leader in this space of innovation. So Earl, we look forward to another great conversation with you.
Great. One editorial I will make to what you said, Jason. I went to Purdue North Central back in the days when you couldn't get your full degree at that location, so you had to transfer. So otherwise, it was my favorite of the years of going to school was up here in Westville. So it really is a great place to be. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, actually, before I share my screen, let's do a little energizer just to get everybody warmed up. Okay, so go ahead and turn on your camera. Okay, because I'm going to need your help. What we're going to do is I'm going to say I'm going to give you a verbal cue, and then I'd like you with your hands to then give me an action. So it's going to be very simple. Okay, so if I say thumbs up, give me a thumbs up in the camera. Right? Practice, everybody. Thumbs up. There you go. If I say thumbs down, it's going to be thumbs down, right? Everybody, good. If I say, so that's a pair, right? So another pair we got is to catch a ball, catch a ball, do that action, and then to throw the ball. Throw the ball. Good. You guys are doing great. One last pair we'll do is snap your fingers, snap, and then clap. All right. So you guys are very fast, and that's what I was hoping to see. So let's just go through that real quick. Okay, so snap. Yeah, you got to be very quick, right? Thumbs up. Good. Thumbs down. Clap. Oh, you guys are great. You guys are great. Okay, so we're going to add just a tiny bit of complexity to this. Okay, so much like neuroscience tells us that when we use the same neural pathways, things get faster and repetitive, and it becomes habitual, right? We have an input of auditory, a word, and then it goes to that action with our hands. So now we're gonna work with a new set of neural pathways, right? So we're gonna flip and do the opposite pair. So if I say thumbs up, you're gonna do this, and if I say thumbs down, you're gonna do this. All right. If I say snap, you're gonna do this. Clap, right? Catch. Okay, get it? All right, here we go. Let's see how fast you can do this. All right, thumbs up, snap, clap, throw, catch. Very good. You guys are doing great. All right, thank you for indulging me. Was that difficult for anybody? No, pretty easy. A little bit. All right, well, I'm going to share my screen now. So let's see if we can do this and go. Okay, everybody should be able to see my screen. So we're going to talk about leading innovation and complex problem solving. I have a ton of slides that I put into this, and I actually pulled them out because I think this was going to be too long. So at the end, I might have to just kind of run through them without talking about them, but don't worry. You can have a copy of these slides if you would like them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe innovation very broadly, not just Foundry related, so that it applies to the parts of it that apply to any organization. As Jason alluded to, just very briefly, what we do at Hiler Industries, we're a small family-owned foundry that melts metal at 2,800 degrees. We pour it into sand molds. It cools down into the shapes of the metal articles that we call castings, that our business to business buyers would like us to make for them. We do some subcontracting of other things like painting or heat treating or machining and those kinds of things, but we supply a casting in whatever way that the customer would like. All right, so we're going to click forward. So we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we used when we created them, right? It's a great quote from Albert Einstein. And so I'd like you to think about what some of your challenges are when we go through this presentation. And I'll just talk about just a few brief ones that Hiler Industries has overcome with new thinking. So over the years, we've been around for about 75 years, and about every decade we've had to change the type of castings that is our main product that we're supplying. Other companies are innovating maybe they're going from metal to plastics, or there's some changes, like we used to do air conditioning pistons. Those went from an iron to an aluminum to make them lighter. There's all kinds of things go on. So we have to transform ourselves. So that is just sticking around. Any company that sticks around that long has got to be doing innovation just to survive and to thrive. We do a lot of just small incremental kind of stuff. This is some touch screens that we put on our forklifts. To us, this was a big deal. To other people, maybe this isn't that big of a deal, where we can see things with long range barcode readers and a little bit of machine learning, that the programs change the invest cycles based on previous history of temperatures of the sands and those kinds of things. We won a safety innovation award a couple of years ago for combining some LED lighting that wasn't designed for a certain piece of equipment and adding it on. And really the cream of the crop thing that other foundries are noticing that we're doing is about 4 or 5 years ago, we put on these cageless collaborative, what they call cobot, loading and unloading stations. We have 5 of these now, and they're for our auto grind stations. And so I can't even count the number of other foundries in our same business realm that have asked for invitations to come. Can we come take a look at this and see what you're doing, so that we can learn and come and take this back to our locations. And so we let them through and we show them, because the foundry industry is actually really good at sharing these kinds of things with one another. So today we'll talk about defining innovation, how a framework might help you, and talk about some tools. So the very first thing I'd like you to do is, in the chat, I'd like you to think about and type in how you define innovation, because and don't press enter yet. Jason made a good observation that type in your definition of innovation, but don't if you wait to hit it, then your answer won't influence another person's answer. So there are no right and wrong answers, and my definition is probably going to be different than yours, and it's okay. And maybe at the end of this presentation, maybe your definition modifies or changes. Mine has changed over the years. So has everybody got theirs typed in? Go ahead and hit enter, and just like to see a few of those. Being curious, finding a way of meeting a new objective, solving unmet customer needs. These are all very good. I like them. Creating efficiencies and improvements. I like that. Shaping the world. Those are great. These are very good. Okay, so let me get out of that. Okay, so my definition, let me share my definition. And I've borrowed this from Sandra Diaz. She's a Chilean innovator. I've met a couple times, and I just love this definition. Innovation is working outside your realm of current knowledge to bring about new solutions. And if you were to boil that down even further, it's kind of just about learning and how learning brings new solutions. It's not only about learning, because if you don't bring about a new solution, then it's not necessarily innovation. It's kind of the combination of the two. So that's just how I view it. And you should just give thought to how you yourself use it as you think about these things. But no matter how you define it, you are definitely going to need strong management commitment behind you, and essential resources like time and money, and cultural support, a desire to learn. You need to think about how you're going to approach risk and uncertainty, and we'll talk about that just in a second here. And how do you handle failure? That's a whole nother topic in and of itself that we could talk for an hour or more on that. I want to say thank you to Deborah Raybold of That Essential Spark, who gave me this metaphor for innovation. It's like a fish ladder. So some people love to fish upstream, and some people love to some fish love to swim upstream, and so do some people. So the metaphor is, the dam is kind of like the challenge that we're trying to, that's in front of us, that we can't figure out the way around. But if we have some of these tools, the aquatic life that wants to go upstream, some aquatic life doesn't want to, they just want to stay in the pool, and that's fine. But if they want to travel up, if we can give them tools, then they can get there. So let's talk about swimming up the uncertainty stream. One of the books that I've read recently is Amy Edmondson's Teaming. And this really, really brought into context some great concepts. So she likes to think of dividing up the complexity of operations based on uncertainty. And so over on the left side are routine operations where things are stable, people are in habits, you repeat and do the same things over and over, and you're more focused on efficiency improvements, those kinds of things. And that is certainly fine for some organizations, the military, those kinds of things. On the other side of the spectrum are innovation operations, and where you're looking at R&D, and your learning focus is on discovery. There are no real boundaries. And then what she describes is somewhere in the middle, and this is where I kind of like to be myself, where there is some uncertainty. You're faced with uncertain inputs, uncertain outputs, and this is, again, across broad spectrums. You could think about this in a hospital, in an educational field, in any kind of organization where there's uncertainty. And what is your comfort level with where you want that uncertainty to be? And so learning focus in this area is about transformation. This parallels what the McKinsey Group and some other folks have talked about horizons, with incremental innovation to disruptive innovation. And some people will say, hey, incremental innovation isn't even innovation at all. I would personally disagree with that, but I don't necessarily, I don't want to say that somebody's wrong about that. Everyone has their own viewpoint on this. And all of us are in different organizations where there is different uncertainty affinity. The last parallel that I want to draw is from Stephen Covey on I think it's in his first of the 7 habits of highly effective people, is where he's suggesting that you want to have a P-PC balance, and P is production, where there's no long-term focus, or what he alludes to as the golden egg. And on the other side is production capability, which is the goose, the golden goose. And the story goes, you have the golden goose, you find the golden goose that starts giving off the golden eggs, and if you cut the golden goose open to try to get the eggs quicker, that's more about greed. That's not the story that I want to tell. It's more that if you only focus on the egg and you don't take care of the goose, then you are more in the routine operation and you're driving, that side of the uncertainty. And it doesn't really work well for you if you're only paying attention to the goose. You're only learning things and you're not actually producing anything. You're on that innovation, uncertainty side, and what Stephen Covey is recommending is a balance between the two. All right, I won't go into details on this other than to just say it'll be available to you later if you want to look it up. But it's from Amy Edmondson. It's more detail about how you decide whether you're in a routine or an innovative operation. For example, I'll just choose one. If your organization has a hierarchy of chain of command, that works well in routine operations, but it doesn't work as well, she says, in innovation operations. And are you willing and accepting of people dissenting towards your view and asking, do you encourage them to ask questions, or are questions frowned upon because you are more in a different mode? Again, this helps you to decide where you are in the spectrum of or the continuum between uncertainty and complex operations. So the best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas, because not all ideas are good ideas that come to success. Is probably the way I should say that. Actually, any idea is a good idea in the context of it helps to drive other ideas. And so let's talk about frameworks and the tools to help to get us to a lot of different ideas. So when you have a creative problem-solving framework, here are some of the basics. Much like if you're building the Brooklyn Bridge, you have to kind of start with the thought ahead of time, but that is all based, the strength of everything that you're coming up with is based on a framework. So if you start with an intent that matches what your business imperative is, whatever that may be, that will help you to align where you're going with the clarification of the context of what you're trying to solve. What problem are you going to solve? And it helps, believe it or not, to set guardrails. I thought about this the opposite way, that I initially, and then the more I got into it, the more I realized it actually is more difficult to create a problem solve when you don't have boundaries. When you have a complete whiteboard, people don't have, they just don't have, it's just harder to do. And so when you set certain guardrails in the front end, then it can actually help your team do a better job of finding what it is that you need to find. The next thing is, I would recommend articulating your problem in a challenge statement of how might we, and that is based on denoting a method and possibility and the collaborative nature of everything. It just helps the teamwork. Okay, so this is where I'd like to, if you go up to your top of your screen, there's going to be a pull down menu that's going to come up, and there's an annotate button. And if you hit on the annotate, then you can go to a stamp, and you can draw like a heart. I'm going to put a heart there. Okay. I'm going to clear that off just for now. But what I'd like you to do is get ready, and I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd like you to put a stamp on the drawing of a heart, whatever, whatever you find there. So my question is, based on divergence and convergence, the simplest form of a creative problem solve framework is in divergence and then convergence. So divergence is where you create choices. You think about things and how might they happen and what if. And then on the other side of that is the convergence, where you make choices and you make judgments. So what I'd like you to do is to put a stamp on which one of these that you think is the more innovative side of the framework. I see a bunch of hearts kind of over to the side. So we got some coming over on divergence. And if you think they're equal, put it in the middle, by the way. Carrie's got it in the middle. Doesn't look like everybody's put one up there, but Sandra's got one in the middle. So the answer is they're actually equal in the eyes of innovation, because much like breathing, oops, I just put another one on there. I need to get out of annotate. All right, hopefully I can go forward now. Yes, so like breathing, actually I need to get back in there and clear all my drawings. There we go. Okay, so like breathing, we can't do one without the other. You can't take a breath and hold it forever. And it's the same with divergence and convergence. You can't only do one. You have to create, and then you have to judge. And the real trick is knowing when to do each. Have you ever been in a meeting where it was a meeting where you had a bunch of proposals to go over and to make a decision on which one you were going to go forward with? I mean, we've all probably been there. That is not the time to throw out new ideas. That is a judgment meeting, and it won't work with creating new ideas. There are other meetings where you don't want to have any judgments. It's all yes and you want to be creating. So the trick is to know which to do when. All right, so now we come to my favorite framework of all of them that I have used or been made aware of, and it's called Foresight. But you should think about what problem-solving innovation framework you want to use. There are many of them out there. A very popular one is called design thinking. It's very heavy on the empathy and the front end of things. Double diamond, and there's 3-step frameworks. There's 4, even plan, do, check, act, which is very big in the quality world. That's another framework to use. It's heavier on the back end. There's 8-step, there's 7-step, there's all these different ones. The one that has meant the most to me in a practical term has been this Foresight, because there's different, well, here, let me click on it. So what it does is it divides the creative problem solving methods into 4 steps: clarification, generating ideas, developing, and then implementing. And all of these steps have different components of it. And the cool thing is that all of us have preferences where we like to be in certain sections of this. Implementing, folks that are implementers are really time deadline driven. And it doesn't necessarily matter to them if you've come up with the best idea. They're saying, choose an idea and let's get it done. Whereas other, areas, other people with preferences of ideation, they're going to want to I want to come up with a million different things, and it doesn't really matter what you do with them, but these are the things. So there's a place to be within this. And unlike, for me personally, Myers-Briggs and the Hartman Value Profile and some of these other quantifiable labeling methods and processes, or I don't know that they're actually processes, these other evaluations have not been as useful or practical to me in a day-to-day basis. I don't refer back to Myers-Briggs ever. Now, that doesn't mean that some people don't, but it doesn't work for me in what I do. This has a process and a quantifiable questionnaire that then tells you where your preferences are and where your blind spots might be. So it's very interesting. And so the reason I've got the Rosetta Stone in there, I'm sure you all know what the Rosetta Stone is. It was a stone that was the key to figuring out the translation between ancient hieroglyphics and I think it was Greek. And so you could finally figure out how to talk not talk, but figure out what things were being said. And this process is much like that. I'll just forward through all these things. And these are just this is my own preference profile. I've taken the questionnaire a number of times, and my profile has always stayed in the same waveform. Different people have different waveforms on this. And over the years, I have grown my preference. All right, enough of that. So when a change in perception takes place, the facts don't change, but their meaning does. So have you all seen chalk art? If you haven't seen it in person, you've probably seen it on the internet, right? So it's designed to be perceived from one perception, from one direction. When you see it from another perspective, right, it doesn't look near the same. And so the question is, are you able to do this not just with your eyes? Are you able to do the same thing in a problem solve with your brain? So we're going to talk about some lenses and ways to change your perception. So anybody a fisherman out there, or fisherwoman, fisher person? No. So if you are into fishing, one of the things that you might do is you might put it on a set of polarizing lenses glasses, and that can actually let you see into the murky water where you otherwise would not be able to see where the fish are. And so the analogy is here that we're not going to do this with our eyes, we're going to do this with our brain. Again, much the same like the chalk art. There's a great book, and how are we doing on time, by the way? I don't want to run, we're running a little long. So I'm just going to skip forward just really quickly through this. This is a great book that I would recommend, The Four Lenses of Innovation. And it talks about different ways you can look at putting a filter or a lens on your thinking to get new ideas. Challenging orthodoxies, the way things are, people think, well, that's the only way we do things around here. Looking at trends, looking at your core and comparing it, or not comparing it, but taking your core and combining it with other cores from other folks in networking. Understanding that a customer is not just a source of money, but a customer is a wealth of information. That are you taking advantage of that information? And looking at possible unmet needs. Then there's also analogs. Analogs aren't necessarily directly talked about in this book, but they're one that we used in the nonprofit exercise through the Certified Innovation Mentorship Program, where we were looking at how might we improve patient transition from hospital to home. And so what the analog in that realm was people in transition. So you're talking about hospitals and how you do one thing in hospital, but you look at how other people solve analogous problems, and then you do primary research with them, and then it's all just to come up with that extra depth of idea that hopefully can help you in a new way that you hadn't thought of, or basically learning to find new solutions, if we're going to go back to a definition of innovation. So so in this particular thing, you could talk to like folks that are going through transition of weight loss, or from being unbanked to banked, or as a prisoner transitioning back into society, or the role of a costume designer as they help an actor or actress transition themselves into the role of a character, and how the fit of their costume is so deeply important to their psychology as they do that. Provide tools to let people do their best. If this person showed up at your door to help you, which one would you rather have, right? You'd rather have the person with more tools. So that's what we're talking about is, what tools, innovation tools, can you learn to help you through complex problem solving? These are the next few slides are just a couple things. There's a great book, 10 Types of Innovation. It divides your business into 10 different sections, and it asks questions, and it shows you examples of other businesses that have done, organizations that have done innovation in these different competencies. And then there's the business model canvas, which I personally think is one of my favorite tools of all. This is a session that I did, a training at Hiler Industries, where it's a one-page business model, and it's really just fabulous to look at the 9 different sections of your business, use Post-it notes. This is my existing business. Okay, this is how I might want to then change these Post-it notes and move things around 5 years from now, and then maybe I'm looking 10 years from now. So it's just a different way to gauge and to learn. These are just some books that have helped me in my own journey of learning kind of innovation and self-development and creativity and thought. I would highly recommend any of these. I just love particularly like Luc de Brabander and the way that he thinks about things. I love Viktor Frankl, and it's just a different way to look at things in different perspectives. The 7 Habits, teaming, anything from Amy Edmondson is just great. But reframing your own mind and working on your own way that you look at things will help you in your innovation journey or problem solving journey. And that's pretty much, I've got other slides if nobody has questions, but hopefully people have some questions. I would maybe ask you how, of the things that you typed out in the chat, do you want to modify anything based on what you heard, or you're pretty set today that, yeah, that confirms the way that I've been thinking about it and I want to stick with it? Any other reflections? We'll open it up to questions and anything that you guys want to talk about.
Well, thank you, Earl. That was fantastic. So a quick little snap for Earl. Really appreciate that. I get two questions real quick, and probably a little related. But this was a great divergence of a lot of resources, a lot of great tools. And I know there's varying levels, just knowing some of the folks that have joined us today, of awareness or even knowledge, working knowledge of some of these tools. But I guess for those that may be new to some of these, again, a lot of great resources to look at, but to start to converge a little bit. I mean, what in your experience, for someone that may be new to this, what are some of the more approachable ones, or where's the best place to start if you had to take one of these 12?
Yeah. Well, one that I just think is really broadly based, that works for any kind of organization is this the business model canvas. And in fact, I listened to your the young entrepreneurs going through the contest for that you had a month or so ago. Those they were great presentations. And I just think if they took that and they would amplify their own presentations, if they did this one-page business model, it would not only help their presentation, because it's a nice way to present what it is that they want to, for their business ideas. And it also helps them think through some of these things in just a little bit more depth. It's pretty, like I said, it's very broadly applicable, and it's one of my favorite tools. It's one of my favorite tools.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And then here we're starting to get some questions in the chat. So two, again, somewhat related, but looking at this, I mean, you're the innovation leader at Hiler. So, it's really your task to know this and to learn all this and keep a radar up to put more tools in your toolbox. But these questions are related to, okay, now how do you start implementing that in the workplace? So first from Carl, we've got, addressing behaviors needed for innovation in the workplace. So I guess, how do you start, leading innovation with all of this?
Yeah, so, again, I guess you have to have, it's a good question, Carl. You have to know the context of what your workplace is in the realm of uncertainty. What are you willing? What is your management willing and leadership willing to do? If you're only going to be, if they want to be in a routine space and have very little uncertainty, then if you're bringing in all these crazy uncertainty ideas and you're okay with it, but they're not, there's a disconnect. And so you kind of have to temper what it is that how you cross those boundaries. But oftentimes leadership and management, may want these things and they don't know how to do them. So there's a fine line. You have to know where you are and where you want to be to help answer the question of, what these things are that you do to get, from here to there.
Okay, thanks, Earl. And then the other question actually coming from Sheila. So again, related to, leading innovation in the workplace, but talk a little bit in your experience of, leading innovation, but in an environment where innovation is not necessarily perceived as, necessary or helpful.
Yeah, it's a good question too, because the word innovation in and of itself has become very overused in commercials. It's in probably at least every other commercial, if not every single commercial. People are just throwing the word innovation around, and it almost becomes so much of a buzzword that it loses its effectiveness. And actually, you can actually sense I kind of hate that word. Stop using that word. So that's fine. That you don't have to use the word innovation to innovate. And actually, you don't. I mean, nobody has to even use any of these tools to innovate. People can innovate without going through all these formal processes. Some of these formal processes were kind of developed to make the process of innovation better in the last few decades. But Edison didn't have this when he worked on the development of his light bulb. So, and if you want to talk about that, like in the context of foresight, right? So his couple thousand different versions of what the light bulb was, he was definitely diverging and converging. And he was probably a developer. He really hit that pretty hard. So he started with an idea that the electric arc lamp had been around for decades and decades prior to that. So there was some context, and he thought, well, there's a better way. There must be a better way to do this. He had an idea to take, I think it was platinum, and maybe it was a metal change that needed to occur, but he found quickly that had nothing to do with it until he learned that there was a vacuum that was needed, right? So so he's traveling through the foresight of ideation and developing, and then he's going backwards. It's a back and forth, and so then he's developing and trying all these different bamboos from Indonesia, and then this is the funniest thing of all is that he came up with, so he developed the vacuum, and then he was sitting back and contemplating about what is the right thing, and he picks up this filament of this lint, and it was essentially carbon, and he's sitting there rolling it in his fingers and thinking, and then he realized, oh, I haven't tried carbon in the vacuum, and then that ended up being what he ended up using for the light bulb. So it was that detachment away from the deep problem that led to that aha moment or that eureka moment, like the same thing that Archimedes had when he discovered that the way to figure out whether this gold crown is complete gold or it's fake gold was he went and he was contemplating, and he was in the Roman baths and figured out, oh, wait a minute, it's buoyancy that helps me to decide what the density is, So I think I got a little off topic on answering your question, Sheila, but essentially bringing it back to what you wanted to ask there is, not every environment is encouraging of innovation. Not every environment wants it. But it doesn't mean that you or I or any of us shouldn't approach our own creative problem solving, because we're all in different areas of a business, and even certain departments within an organization could have different levels of uncertainty that they would like at different times. Our accounting department may not want to change the method of how they do payroll today, but because they changed it 5 years ago, and they're not due for another change for another few years, they may not be ready for it, but another department may be ready for it. So all of these dynamics are at play. But if we are of a mindset of growth and using articulated language of yes and how might we and those kinds of things, then essentially we are approaching what it is that we want to do, and maybe we bring others along with a pull rather than a push.
Great, thanks, Earl. Just one more follow-up on that to kind of put it maybe a little more personable. If you wouldn't mind sharing one of the examples of your work at Hiler, you shared about this cobot project and bringing some robotics into the shop floor. I mean, it's fair to say we see it in the headlines, right? Some of this skepticism of automation or robots, taking our job maybe, or, just, new technology. Can you share from your experience, maybe how you overcame some of that skepticism, if there was any, bringing that new project in?
Yeah, that was a really hallmark project. And it was the one that I had done as my project in the Notre Dame program. It wasn't me who did the robotic programming. It was one of our other engineers. But I had brought back we had been thinking about how might we automate the process a little more to take some of the ergonomics, improve some of the ergonomics where people were holding on to castings and getting some of that vibration, to reduce potential injuries. These castings are sometimes heavy. There's potential dust in the air that might be a problem. So we're looking at all these different ways to improve, and so I brought back some of the things from the Notre Dame program. I taught our team foresight. We did some orthodoxy lenses, and we went through some of these things. And what we did is we just dove in and bought a collaborative robot and brought it to one of the fellas' garages, and it sat in his garage, and we set it up on a ladder. And for 2 months, he played with it and learned how to use it. It was our very first introduction into robotics. But because we had also wanted to, at Hiler, we had wanted to engage our employees, I was thinking that a cageless robot would be more engaging, and hopefully that our employees would then learn how, because they're supposed to be easier to program, and they are easier to program. They're what they are is that they've got an arm with force feedback on it, so if it bumps into you, it will stop. Whereas this standard traditional industrial robot just powers right through, and it has to have a cage around it. It has to be lockout, tag out to get into it. So this is a much more engaging, friendly, receptive type of automation. But so we go through this whole program, and it was 10 months to go through it. And meanwhile, the owner of the company is like, why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? And I'm learning through this Notre Dame program, it's like 10 months is actually a very short time period for these types of innovations. The average is like a year and a half. But we're going through and we're trying to hit some time deadlines. So I'm the implementer on the group, and I've got the time pressure, and my other engineer, he's doing all the development, and we're working together as a team, pretty well, and we made it happen. But on the last day before presenting this to the employees, I kind of got rumblings that, oh, now these employees are thinking, well, this robot, the first one, and the ones that we're may do later, are going to take people's jobs away. I'm like, oh, this is so far from the purpose or the motivation from the company's perspective. It had zero to do with it. So I did a point analysis, POINT, which is you look at the positives, opportunities, issues, and then what's new thinking, POINT, and listed out all of the reasons why we're doing this project. And I brought every employee into a group of meetings, and I said, look, these are the reasons why we're doing this. And it was just open and transparency. And then we had a kind of a big unveiling, wasn't necessarily a party, but we brought everybody out, explained it to them, and everybody just settled down, and nothing changed with the numbers of people that we had employed. It made their jobs in that location simpler and easier. And so that's kind of a long, drawn out answer to your question, but it is a kind of an interesting story. And like I said, we've got a number of different foundries that are just really curious about how that we did this, and they've tried something similar on their own, and they're having their own struggles with it. And so we had one come through last week, and another foundry's coming through again next week to come and look at it.
Yeah, thanks, Earl. Yeah, so I did want to acknowledge, I think we had this actually advertised till 12:45, and we are at that mark, if not a few minutes over. I think we are learning that the engagement at these sessions, probably are still taking the full hour. But I did want to, if you were planning for that and you have to bow out, please don't feel shy to do so. And I guess, Earl, if you still have a few minutes, we have a kind of a last call for any final questions here for Earl.
How do you all, I mean, I would ask you, how do you all do your creative problem solving? I mean, all of us are facing issues, right? So what are some of your experiences and how things go for you guys?
Can I respond, ask you a question on that?
Sure.
Earl, and this is something I know you deal with in your work, that this four-step model that you mentioned that had clarify the situation, generate ideas, develop solutions, and implement plans. My work is always needed to get clarification of situations, and find that challenging because it gets confusing very quickly when you try to define what is it we're really trying to solve. Before and getting to that before all these ideas on solutions are put out that aren't really addressing that. And I just want to get your comment on that. I know that's something I deal with, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that is absolutely correct. We all can end up going down rabbit holes that are the wrong rabbit holes. And so if we don't, that's why it's really important to kind of articulate your challenge statement and how might we do this. And you also want to tie it, as I said, back to your business imperative. So I know the business that you're in, Bob, and so in ventilation design, right? So part of the clarification on the front end, right, is why are we doing the ventilation? It's for regulations, but how far do we take it? What part? How deeply do we take those industrial hygiene numbers that we want to drive the ventilation, that what the personal exposures are for the employees down? Do we just want to meet the regulation, or do we want to do something deeper? There's a continual improvement aspect to it too, but setting those boundaries as the guardrails that we talked about early. If you set the guardrails early and as to what your context is of how deeply you want to go on this and where you do want to go and where you don't want to go. Guardrails could be monetary too. You could set your guardrails. I cannot spend more than X amount. It could be, I cannot devote more than, these amount of people, or I only want to look in this section of the business. So those guardrails on the front end are very, very important.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. And Earl, I'll call your attention to one final question here that's in the chat now as well from Carrie, that they're looking to change the culture in their organization. You shared several books. There's a whole screen of those. So maybe what book do you recommend? But then specifically this thought around, right, okay, we know we want to change. The leadership is embracing the change, but we're getting the pushback from defensive employees.
Well, that's very good. That's a good question. So one of the books I've come back to and read a couple times is, have you read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Carrie? You're on mute.
A long time ago.
Yeah, it's a good one to come back to. And maybe that's one of those things that sometimes I've seen organizations buy books for employees and hand them out. And maybe in today's age, that's not a hard copy book. Maybe that's an iBook, where you just encourage people, maybe not mandate it, but just if you buy them for everybody in your organization, here's some things to, and then you talk, you can then have conversations about that elsewhere. The listening pays that's on the list. There's a group that we did this at our organization where we asked managers and supervisors and some of our lead people, would you be interested in participating in this? Because we're going to bring in some outside facilitators. So where you read this book, you do this quantifiable test taking, and then we present the information for you on how good of a listener are you or aren't you, and in what facets of listening do you do well in, and what are your blind spots. And just listening in and of itself is a very critical, very basic, necessary component to communication. And so any of these growth mindset, the mindset, Carol Dworek, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, the mindset book is great. You can't change other people. That's the one thing, right? We may want to change other people, but the only person or only thing that this is Viktor Frankl, right? The only freedom of choice that we have is how we choose to respond between the stimulus after we get the stimulus. And so you can have everything taken away from you, and you only have the freedom to make your own choice of how you respond. And so, how do you lead other people into making changes? Yeah, it's hard, but there's some good stuff out there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Earl, thank you so very much for this time spent with us today. You just scraped the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more. If someone wants a copy of your presentation, will you make that available to us so we can share that?
Yeah, I can, I'll create a PDF. It's a huge, it's like a 20 meg file. So
Okay.
as a PowerPoint, I almost couldn't get it to Jason because it was so large. But I'll create a PDF of it and get it to Jason. I'll also try to post it on my LinkedIn page here shortly. So
Okay, wonderful.
if you want to get it off of that. So either way.
Thank you so much. This was just really fascinating. As you can hear, some of the questions that we have are people trying to take your ideas and make them into practical approaches that we can use in our workplace. And one of the things that you said was, that we need to have that toolbox. And so how do we add innovation to our toolbox and not be afraid of the challenges? And Carrie made a really good point. What do you do when you're ready to create change and think innovatively, and your leadership team might be, but people are reticent to change. Change is scary. And for a lot of people, just doing things the way that they've always, how many times have we all heard the line, but we've always done it this way, right? So again, Earl, you are always such a gentleman and a scholar. Every time you come, you bring us great ideas and great content, and we are most appreciative. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, all of you, for joining us and spending an hour of your time with us today. Thanks.
Thank you. And I appreciate everybody being here.